What is the status of the trade arrangement with the United States and Canada as it pertains to agriculture? More importantly, where are things going between these two countries, which have the biggest trade relationship on the planet between any two countries? That's what I'm talking about in this episode of The Business of Agriculture. Are you looking for productive efficiencies in growing higher yielding, better performing crops? New Fields Ag provides a complete portfolio of biological products focused on you, the farmer. Visit newfieldsag.com for more information to help you farm better. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of The Business of Agriculture. Got a great one for you today because I've got a great guest. His name is Shaun Haney, host of Real Ag Radio, Canada's only daily agriculturally themed program. Did I get that right, by the way, Shaun? That's what you say in your promotion. Canada's only daily ag-centered program, right?
Yeah, exactly. We are essentially the only national radio program focused on agriculture in the country.
And I love it. And I was on there a couple of weeks ago. My friend Sam Coutu, who I know through XtremeAg, clear over in Quebec, which is a completely disparate part of Canada from where Shaun is from. He's an Albertan. Said, "Hey, I listened to your radio," and I can't do the French accent, but he told me, I hear you on with Shaun on Real Ag Radio." And I said, "Oh, it's amazing." Anyway, I know that was a terrible French accent.
That wasn't good.
No, it wasn't good at all. That's more what I think it was.
Closer.
Exactly. All right, but we're not here to talk about Quebec. We're not here to talk about French accents. We're here to talk about Canada and the United States as it pertains to agriculture. I feel like there is some strife, and I don't feel that unjustifiably. I have seen it. I think I see it more from Canadians than I do from Americans. I know that there is a certain amount of, shall we say, pride that came out because they felt insulted by the American president, Donald Trump, when he said that we should just go ahead and make Canada our 51st state. And ever since that time, which has been now several months ago, Shaun and I are recording this beginning of September 2025, we've gotten some tension, and it's not good. And I have said forever on stage, the United States cannot rely on China. We should not rely on them for a provider, a supplier of our stuff, because they have us over a barrel. They've done that to us twice. But also we became too dependent on them as a customer, as did many countries, because they had this exploding economy that has a growing middle class. And it was easy for us to just do what we love to do in America. Make soybeans and stick them on a ship and ship them over to China. But you know what? I called a long time ago, a decade ago, and said, this is dangerous. We are too dependent on them. You know what? We've got opportunities right here at home. People scoffed at me. And I said, okay, look at Canada, United States. Formed the NAFTA agreement clear back in 94 under President Bill Clinton, re-upped it with USMCA. And I started saying a couple of years ago, you know what? Our opportunity is right there. Well, I was right. China is dropping like a rock as a customer of American agriculture. Clearly, right as we speak right now, the whole soybean complex is flipping its gourd because they have not bought any harvest time soybeans from the United States of America. But it was never in their plan. Their plan was always to use Brazil as the supplier and to eventually wean themselves off of any dependence on the United States of America. I said a long time ago, we should depend on these relationships close to home. You may not know this, but Mexico is now the United States' #1 agricultural customer. That's right. Surpassed China a couple of years ago, about 30-some billion dollars. I'll pull you up these numbers. $30+ billion in the year 2024. You know who's number 2? Canada. Canada's neck and neck with Mexico, has been for the last couple of years. $28.4 billion of agricultural goods were purchased by Canada from the United States of America. We are Canada's largest customer here in the United States of America. About 50% of the trade is actually in energy from places like where Shaun is from. That's why they call those teams the Edmonton Oilers and the Calgary Flames, because after all, they produce a lot of energy out there as well as agricultural products. So Shaun and I are going to dig into where things are right now, which is constantly changing, and where things are going with our two countries. We are not radicals. We're not in a fight. I always say, if you guys want to get that way, make sure you do that at a hockey game. But right now, let's just make sure that we're talking about how we can make this all work out because it's good for both of our countries. Shaun, thanks for being here.
Hey, it's great to be here. Absolutely. This is an important topic that, I think we all understand is constantly in flux. And you're talking about who's number one customer. If USDA's forecasts are right on ag exports, China's going to be number 6 in 2026, my friend. Yeah. Behind the EU, Japan, and South Korea, as well as, of course, Canada and Mexico. Mm-hmm.
So thinking about that,
China is go ahead.
Well, one thing that I always bristle at, we lump this together, and American ag has been so focused on China. It's like a bad habit. You couldn't go to an ag meeting. I know you speak at ag meetings here in the United States, as well as over in Canada and up in Canada. And I said, this China fixation is unhealthy, but also it's you're talking about, like you said, China's going to drop from first to third to sixth and continue. And it's not because, oh, we pissed them off, Donald Trump. This was always the game plan. The game plan was to wean themselves off of any dependence of the United States of America. The Belt and Road Initiative that China instituted in the year 2013, deploying billions of dollars of cash, Chinese yuan, into third world countries to create infrastructure to extract resources, did not include the United States. In fact, it was a defense against the United States. This has been going on now, a plan of theirs for 12 years. Of course, they're going to be sixth.
Yeah, and they may be back. Like in 2027 or 28, they may be back to number 2 or number 3 or maybe even number 1, but the consistency is not there.
The consistency has been that they've been declining every year, buying less of our stuff on a percentage basis and on a real dollar basis.
Well, and I keep hearing farmers in Canada, and the U.S., because Canada's got its own struggles with China. Like we got some common lot there. And I'll hear farmers say, we need to get back to like predictable, stable markets, where there's consistency, and that ship sailed. It's not happening. Now you're going to get some consistency out of Canada, Mexico, Japan. I would even argue like a South Korea, but India and China, they're not the same. Okay, they are opportunistic buyers that are going to come and go, and when the business is there, it's really good, and we love it, and we're like addicted to it, as you described. But it's not something we can bank on long term.
Well, there's a few things. First off, there's the economic aspect of it. You can talk about the cultural aspect of it. That's not really at play. As you just said, for the United States of America, Japan's a great customer. Well, they culturally don't have what the United States and Canada have in common, and we're going to get to that in a minute. Settled by Europeans, et cetera, generally Christian countries, all those things. It's not the cultural thing that keeps it at bay. It's that neither Japan nor South Korea deem themselves to be adversarial or want to be the replacement as the world's biggest economy.
Yep.
China's aspiration is what separates them from the United States, and China's adversarial position, it's not about a cultural thing or an ethnicity thing. It's about the economics and the military that are the difference in my view. Am I right?
Yeah, I think you're correct. And I think if I have a critique of the White House trade strategy in this current environment, it is that they continue to look at things in a very binary fashion, where they are looking at Canada and Mexico, for example, the same as China.
Yeah.
And not thinking more strategically. So yeah, I think most people can get their head around, okay, China and India are especially China, are nefarious characters. They're not very good. Yeah. And they have other intentions. And so should we apply the same strategy on, should Canada and Mexico face the same harshness and strategy that's being applied to China? I think a lot of people have a hard time getting their heads wrapped around that, and are really sort of like, okay, let's get past this whole, obviously we've moved past some of the 51st state stuff, but this is an opportunity for some stability. Let's create some stability at home on this continent before we start to take on countries like China, like the US.
I promise that we're going to get into the prediction of where two ag thinkers that have a bit of, shall I say, national to international exposure, that being Shaun and me. And I do want to get into the prediction. Before I do that, I want to give you some current. And the current is changing. So we'll start with the current numbers, and we'll also start with the current situation on tariffs, trade spats, et cetera. Before I do that, I want to remind you, you know what? Shaun and I both have shows. He's got Real Ag Radio. I've got the Business of Agriculture, and we are very grateful to have sponsors. You heard it up front, the Newfields Ag folks sponsor the show. Well, so does Harvest Returns. I'm wearing their hat right here. Harvest Returns is a company that helps agricultural companies get funding. Funding your farm, your ranch, or your agribusiness does not have to be hard. Your operation's unique, so why should your funding fit the template? You know what? Maybe you have an idea. You're going to do a value-added specialty meat company. You go to the bank and they say, this doesn't fit our template. This doesn't fit our normal forms. You know what? That doesn't mean you're out of luck, because there's money everywhere. There's capital looking for a return, and much of it wants to be in agriculture. You can find this kind of money from Harvest Returns. They have agribusiness clients like you, and they team up with a pool of over 18,000 investors to create financing options that are creative and work around you. Harvest Returns can bring the capital you need to reach your goals. Visit www.harvestreturns.com to learn more about how you can get started to grow your agricultural enterprise today.
And Damien, on that point, in this kind of profitability environment where there's a lack thereof, we need to have creativity in our business plans and maybe looking outside of the common streams to be able to find opportunities for our operations, and less celebration of conforming and more celebration of creativity and new business models.
You're different than many people in ag, as am I. And I talk about the entrepreneurial mindset versus the commodity mindset. And it's kind of the old thing: did humans invent the assembly line, or did the assembly line create modern humans? I don't know which one it is. And I think that way a little bit in agriculture. Agricultural people are the majority, very guilty of commodity mindset. How cheap can I produce something? How much can I make? How many units can I make, and how cheaply can I make them? And I think we need more entrepreneurialism in ag, and I think that some outside forces coming to this industry are a good thing. You may not like Elon Musk, but he's not a car guy. He came from a completely different set of background into the car business, right? So I think that ag needs some of that to that point. Let's talk about numbers. You gave them before we hit the record button. They're tough to keep up with, but where are we right now on the trade spat between the United States and Canada?
Yeah, I think we've got some pretty hefty tariffs when it comes to steel and aluminum under the Section 232. I think they're about 50% now, which is creating a lot of heartache for U.S. soft drink manufacturers, for sure. If you are shipping goods that are under USMCA compliance, no tariff. Mm-hmm. But if they are outside of that, they're non-USMCA compliant. I think it's like 35%, and that increased from 25%. I think at the beginning of August. So if you look at it, although the talk has been really stiff and tough, and a lot of tough talking, spirited talk, Canada and Mexico are being treated much better than some of the other countries. But also, this is a different trading relationship for the U.S. This is absolutely critical. I think, I've been saying for a long time, you cannot roll forward with the same treatment of Canada and Mexico as you did with the UK, or what you're doing with China or India or Japan or South Korea or any other country, because you are connected. Mm-hmm. You have integrated complementary supply chains across many different industries, not just agriculture, many different industries. And so it would create much more economic hardship for the United States if you are to bundle Canada and Mexico into that same kind of technique.
Yeah. So, and you're talking about where things should be, and I'm going to agree with you. But before we get to that, I want to again share those numbers, because I think it's very important. If you are an American in ag, you've been going to these meetings just like I have for 20 years here. China. I get sick of it. I actually want to pull. I heard one of these talking head fossils. Yes, I realize I'm 56, so I was talking about someone that's older than me, because everybody older than you is old. You understand how these things work.
I hear you. Yeah.
This
I still
fossil,
think I'm 25. So. I still think I'm 25, so there's that.
A few hip replacements and knee surgeries later, you won't think you're 25. But anyway, this fossil was doing the same old stuff on one of the old traditional ag media programs. We don't know what we're going to look at. China's going to start making some purchases. I thought, holy crap, is this the same? I feel like I just tuned into 2014. For God's sakes. Think about where things are going. I'm telling you, China's not going to be any sort of a godsend for us. And what we need to do as the United States of America, and I think Canada's really come along with this also, is you want access to this market. 2 G7 countries, obviously 24% of the global economy here in the United States, about 2% of the global economy in Canada. Obviously a safe customer, a reliable customer. You want access to that? Then play ball and take our ag stuff. I think it's time we should use our force. But to use our force, and obviously force, market position.
Yep.
To use our market position, we'd be better off as a unit, meaning U.S., Mexico, Canada. A couple of numbers that you maybe don't know. Okay, I told you that in last year, 2024, Mexico purchased $30.3 billion of American agricultural exports. Canada was right behind them at 28.4. China's at 24.7. To Shaun's point, the European Union was about half of that at 12.8 billion. Just go ahead and take some numbers here also. And then Japan was after that. South Korea was after that. I just want to give you some numbers. I think South Korea was around 10 billion. China has 1.3 billion people. There are 40 million people across our border. So Canada, with what does that amount to? You want to do that math real quickly? I'll just do that math for you really quickly. 40 million
A lot less.
With 3% of the population. Canada's sitting there with 3% of the population of China and buying a couple $1 billion more stuff. What does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean that they have a lot of upside in terms of they can't all of a sudden quadruple that because they ain't got enough mouths to feed with 40 million people. But with 3% of China's population, they're buying more of our stuff. When everybody keeps thinking that China, we can't live without them, on a per capita basis, they're not really buying that much shit anyhow. That's where I get bothered by this whole thing. We go to these ag meetings, China, China, China. On a per capita basis, Shaun, you're blowing them out of the water. Your little 40 million marketplace, as opposed to 1.3 billion, is blowing them out of the water. And that's where I think there's such opportunity, not for expansion, but just maintaining. And then with Mexico, has about 10% of the population. There's about 130 Mexican residents, citizens, and they are 10% of the size of China and buying a few $1 billion more than them and increasing as a customer. I think there's tremendous opportunity between these three countries for trade, inter-country trade, as well as then to become more of a market force.
I don't know how many times I'm at an ag meeting in the U.S. where I will say, Canada is only a population of 40 million. U.S. is 400. People are whoa. Canada's only 40 million people. It's a huge country. I'm like, yeah, but it's only 40 million people, and 85% of them will live within like 100 kilometers or 55 miles or whatever from the U.S. border, and really buying a tremendous amount of U.S. agricultural products as well as other goods. The largest purchaser of U.S. ethanol, the largest purchaser of American beef. These numbers can go on and on. And what you're talking about here, from a working together standpoint, is something that has been described a lot as Fortress North America. And the idea here is like, let's work cooperatively to combat some of those nefarious characters like China. And we've kind of worked on this a little bit. This is how the EV tariffs kind of started. The U.S. wanted EV tariffs on EVs coming out of China. Canada was asked by the White House to comply. They also did it. China has been retaliating, putting tariffs on Canadian canola oil and meal, as well as pork and seafood products. But this idea of Fortress North America, and really because the supply chains are integrated and complementary, it makes so much sense to work as collaboratively as possible. You just got one person to convince, and it's the guy in the White House. I'm not sure he exactly sees it that way.
Yeah, and we'll get into the motivations and a couple of things real quickly. And I never correct a guess, but I do want to make sure if you're listening to this, closer to 340 million. Shaun said 400 million in the United States, closer to 340 million. Of course, some of these are uncounted, but about 340 million. And the other one that I think I should point out, the European Union, there are a tremendous amount of cultural similarities between the United States, Canada, and Europe. Obviously, we were settled by Europeans. The European Union gets lumped in here as a customer. Remember, that's 27 countries. 27 countries, which total about 400 million there. And again, 1/3 the size, or a little less than half the size of a customer as Canada.
Well, I'll put it to you this way. Over half the Canadian population is in the state of Florida, because the state of Florida's population is 23 million people.
Yeah, right.
That puts it in perspective.
So so 2 Floridas and you more than cover the entire population. So the other part is the economic thing. To say, okay, there's this person this country we have a border with, and they don't have. It's ridiculous to hunt them as a customer when they can't be a customer. Let's just say that our border, instead of Canada, was Afghanistan. Okay, we not only got the cultural problems, but we also have the economic issues. It don't matter how many people are in. Afghanistan's got like 20 or 40 million, speaking of population, but they can't be customers. They have no money. They have no economy. You're talking about a G7 country. You're talking about an economically stable and wealthy country. And then with Mexico, you're talking about an ascending economy. You're talking about an economy that's growing by, high single digits every year. You're talking about an increasing middle class, other than some gang violent issues and some of the drug trafficking, which I was aware that was a problem, and I did actually support a tougher stance on that. But the political motivation to disrupt this, I've scratched my head a little bit.
Well, and here's the reality. And I remember listening to Greg Dowd, former USTR ag negotiator at the USDA Ag Outlook Forum last spring, talked about how there is no low-hanging fruit out there. the trade wins are incremental, right? We're talking going like tariff code by tariff code. We're trying to squeeze out as much as we possibly can. These big lump sort of wins and new markets, they just don't exist in the current situation. Purdue recently put out some data that 43% of American producers believe over the next 5-year ag exports are going to increase. 13% said they're going to decrease. They could increase, but it's not like this massive, like I think we all go back to like the phase 1 agreement, what, the largest commodity agreement ever negotiated. That just doesn't feel like today's environment.
So I want to tell you, you get around the United States. Hell, you have a home in Arizona, just like I do. So it's not like this is news to you, but to some of the listeners, and we hope we're picking up some Canadian listeners because of you being on here. I'm going to put you inside the psyche of the American producer. Maybe a lot of Americans involved in ag, they aren't even producers that work in the industry. They've been going to these meetings for 20 years, and every two-bit economist gets up and did the same thing. And I found that's why I started becoming more. I used to be the funny guy at ag meetings. Finally, I said, bullshit, I'm going to start putting in more points because I'm tired of hearing the same thing. All they did was take there's 1.4 billion people in China. Now, if each one of them eats an American cheeseburger, one more per week, and then do the math, take it times 1.3 or 1.4 billion and blah, blah, then it was the simplest, stupidest economic equation that then all the people would just nod their head and it told American farmers exactly what I wanted to hear. Go out and make more hamburgers. Go out and make more soybeans. Okay, so they've been hearing this forever. It doesn't surprise me that Purdue, appreciate you mentioning my alma mater, came up with a survey that said 43% of American producers believe that exports are going to increase because that's all they've been told. First off, it's all they've known for the last 20 or 30 or 40 years. And it's also what they've been told. Hey, just go out there and make more soybeans because the population is going to go to 10 billion from 8 billion, and we're going to have to make more food in the next 25 years. I've heard that so much, I started calling BS on that more than a decade ago. I said, this is all a lie. I know you want to hear this. We're not going to make more food between now and 2050 than we've ever made. And we're not going to have 11 billion mouths to feed from 8 billion today. Population is stagnating. It's going to start dropping like a rock. Most of the countries that have the economic advancement opportunity are already there. They're not going to be another China where they double their economy every 14 years and therefore double their caloric consumption. It's a net sum game. I recorded a video about this, Shaun.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
We are where we're going to be. The idea that we're going to have the kind of expansion of exports over the next 20 years that we've had the most recent 20, and this goes for Canada also. If it happens, it's going to be because we stole that trade from somebody else. It's not because there's a bunch of new consumption.
Yeah, and but I also don't want to sound. So I agree with that. And Africa's too far away, and when not like geographically, I mean too far away. I know how that
geographically
sounds.
It's pretty far away.
It is pretty far away.
It's a massively big continent.
But there is an opportunity there as the middle class increases. There is an opportunity there for a new market, but that's not going to solve the problem in 2026, where we've got pretty substantial losses predicted by USDA and Stats Canada for American and Canadian farmers. And so it is going to take the mindset does have to shift. I think, and I try to tell audiences all the time, I'm a firm believer, and we talked about this when you were on Real Ag Radio, farm management is key through these sort of times, and financial literacy, strategic management. Where does my operation need to go going forward? What are the things that I can control in terms of my strategy? Those are the things that are super, super critical at this point, where we're going to see a lot of, we're going to see farm bankruptcies increase. Some people are not going to be allowed to do this going forward, no matter how much government money gets spilled out across the U.S. And that's just kind of the way that's the reality of the current situation.
A couple other realities, again, and in case you're listening to this and you're saying, are you ever going to get to the whole thing about your predictions for U.S. and Canada? Yes, we are, but we got a lot of stuff to cover here because you got two people that are agricultural thinkers that also probably are telling you some stuff that you haven't always heard. And I know I sound mean when I say this whole China. It's because I get it. You've been told this again and again and again. But Damian,
that's true. Okay, but don't we also have to attach India to this. Like I say all the time, if you think trade with China is complicated, let me introduce you to their neighbor India, which is another quagmire of politics and layers that is actually maybe even more complex than the China situation. And I have found that I've been kind of hypercritical, and people have called me sort of negative Nelly, but the opportunity with India is not as profound as people want to make it out to be, as some sort of substitute for the lack of China buying. There are 5 million farmers in the country of India. They are high supporters of Prime Minister Modi. He has said publicly on many occasions he will not do anything in terms of a trade deal with the United States or Canada that it works adversely against those farmers. And so if we just that the India's going to just blow the doors open and no more tariffs, let's do some business. I just don't see that. Even if it is an opportunity for sorghum and corn producers.
Yeah, well, it's also an opportunity for is those people out in your part of the world, what, 1 or 2/3 of of India is vegetarian. And so pulse crops,
they are
edible peas and beans, chickpeas, that stuff works very well. We don't produce that much in the United States of those things. That's been a boon for Western Canada to produce those sort of alternative proteins.
Yeah, but they haven't traded necessarily consistently fairly on that either. You're right. Like a province of Saskatchewan is famous for its pulse crops, chickpeas, lentils, field peas. Yeah. And there's lots of opportunity of growing those acres in Montana and parts of North Dakota. Big shout out to Northern Pulse growers trying to do that. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that, they come and go in that market too, right? Where they don't buy Canadian lentils because they have their own industry and their own production there. Right. And so that hasn't been like just a green light. Let's just keep growing.
No. All right, I'm going to do a big analysis here about 1.3, 1.3, 1.3. So that's where we're coming back. But I want to remind you about another sponsor of the show. It's Redox. Good folks with it, Redox. Getting the most from your nitrogen is crucial to success. Okay, you're going to be faced, if you're a producer, you're going to be faced with nitrogen regulation. You've heard me say this before. I promise you, regulation about the amount of applied synthetic nitrogen is coming. It's coming quicker than you think. So you got to get the most out of your nitrogen. There's a product from Redox Bionutrients that can help you do that. It's called RDXN. It is backed by more than a decade of research and is gaining a lot of momentum with growers, including corn and soybean producers in the Midwest, right here where I'm sitting today. RDXN is patented, proven, plant-active botanical extracts designed to improve your nitrogen efficiency by 50%, while also boosting your crop's quality and consistency. Redox, a family-owned company based in Burley, Idaho, with more than 30 years of success with growers across the United States of America and even somewhat internationally. Find out what. See, I threw that in because of Shaun, one of my international guests. I have Canadians on here quite a bit. I really think that they should give me more credit for being the outreach guy to Canada than I am. Even though I don't do a good French accent.
That's only one province, let's be honest. And people call me a lot of times the unofficial Canadian ag ambassador. You could be the unofficial American ag ambassador if you want to.
I can tell you what, based on some of the people we've had in that role, I would do a lot better job. If you want to learn more about Redox, go to redoxgrows.com. That's redoxgrows.com. Okay, 1.3, 1.3, 1.3. Do you even know where I'm going with this? You probably do.
Go for it.
There's roughly 1.3 billion Chinese. There was at 1.4 billion. They've actually begun losing population, something I predicted a long time ago, because believe it or not, when you forcibly sterilize girls after they have one baby or punish parents for having two babies, the one-child policy obviously is coming home to roost. Now China is obviously trying to boost population with all sorts of PR campaigns. I predict that they've already started paying. I predict they might start forcibly impregnating poorer women. Remember, only about half of China is living the dream. The other half are still peasants. Anyway, they're at one point.
Well, and Damon, history shows us as middle class increases as country becomes more wealthy and as a growing middle class, and they consume more protein, which is, hey, that's good for egg exports. Yep. The other thing that happens, they start to have less kids.
They start to have less babies. So China created a middle class over the last 30 years, and there you go. So right down below China is India, and that's where a lot of folks in places like Canada, United States say, hey, we like producing stuff. We like making pulse crops and soybeans. Let's ship them to India. If China's not going to be our customer, there's also 1.3 billion people in India. To Shaun's point, terrible to deal with. Completely, like if you ever sat down to a table to deal with anybody and you said that was the worst person I ever tried to negotiate a deal with, take it times 10. That's India. That's your point, right? They don't live up to any agreements that they make. They go to they completely whore out. They'll go to anybody, and also they're economically they're expanding, but they're not expanding at China's pace. I think depending on India is a foolish business scenario.
I agree. You're not going to like, so, and there is opportunity. I know on the surface, but it is, you need to put them in the same lot as China in the sense they can be in the market just as likely as they're out of the market.
Right.
It's not, they are not Japan. Japan is a high quality, consistent purchaser that, Canada and both U.S. pursue heavily, especially if you look at the proteins. India and China are not that.
Absolutely. And I'll get to Japan in a moment because that brings up another thing of why Canada, United States, and Mexico need to forge the North American fortress. So speaking of 1.3 billion is almost the exact number of humans who live on the continent of Africa. So you got China around 1.3 billion, India around 1.3 billion, and Africa. And if you are ignorant, as many people are, I'm going to throw you in, and I'm not being mean, I'm just giving you some geography. Africa is not a country, it's a continent. Africa has 54 countries within its continent. That means 54 governments. So when I hear North American agriculturalists tell me and Shaun, you know what we need to do? We just need to go ahead and open up Africa. Screw China. I'm like, oh, that's neat. China has one government, one controlling, overarching, dictatorial government. There are 54 governments in Africa. If you believe that each country only has one, some of them have multiple because of warring tribes, et cetera, et cetera. So there's the other part of it, Shaun. The entire continent of Africa with 1.3 billion people has an economy roughly equivalent to Canada's. You're cranking out as much economic output with your 40 million people in Canada as 54 countries in this massive continent, multiple times bigger than Canada, crank out. 2% of the global economy across that entire continent. Why would we even think that that's going to end up being a customer of North American agriculture?
Because I think of the future opportunity is why, and it's one of the last large growing middle classes. I think so. It's the projection of what could be. It is not what is there today.
Okay, you're in your late 40s. When you're 85, there's a chance that Africa actually comes on as a real customer. I'd say that this is such a long-term play. It's ridiculous for us to even consider
it. That's fair. That's what I mean when it's so far away.
Yeah, right.
Not geographically. I'm not sure I'm outside of your thought bubble on that one.
Right. All right. So the next question is, where should things go? I know that we said we were going to give some predictions and also what we'd like to see. If you and I were the two ambassadors and we also were the negotiators, I think we'd have this hammered out. First off, the current White House is a big proponent of energy, not stupid solar blanketing over solar ground, not stupid wind that's off the shore of Massachusetts and killing the whales. Energy as we've always known for the last 100 years. Perfect. We'll take your Alberta. What did the one politician in Canada call it? Dirty Alberta oil. We'll take it. We'll take it. And what do you want to take from the United States? Well, you're already buying it, right? You're a big customer of our pork, beef, right? What else?
Ethanol for sure. And it's not just the final product; it's the integration, right? It's Iowa pork producers buying wieners out of Manitoba. It is Canadians buying feeder cattle out of Montana. It's those kind of transactions that also really make this trade relationship so special and so important. It's the fact that there's, what is like the average finished vehicle crosses the border like 7 times. Right. As if it's a state line. So it's not just about the finished products.
Yeah, and by the way, what Shaun's talking about there, in case you're a person that a lot of people in ag are really good of keeping up with their sector of ag, but from the automotive industry, so heavily intertwined, particularly between Michigan and Ontario, to that point. So anyway, what do you see happening, and what do you want to see happen?
So here's what I think is going to happen. I think there's going to be a period here where They have to start. The president this week has started the process of informing. They want to do the review of the USMCA. That's no surprise. Yep. But as we move forward on this, I think there's going to be a really ugly spell. I think there's going to be a period where, just like in the first NAFTA renegotiation, where everybody was like, "Oh my God, will we have an agreement? Well, this is crazy. Like, can we actually, like, what's this look like without NAFTA?" I think we're going to go through a repeated similar situation as that. At the end of the day, though, I predict that based on the fact that with some of the U.S. economic, the jobs report that came out today, not great. Canadian GDP numbers, not great. Right. All three of these countries cannot afford to not have this agreement. I don't care if you are the most America first person in this audience, period, or what the president says, we don't need Canada. That's bluffing and hot air. It is absolutely incredibly important. It's integral that these three countries have this trade agreement, and they're going to find a resolution. Although there will be some pretty rough roads here in front of us. Yeah,
I mean, and then the big picture. Labor doesn't necessarily like the fact that Mexico is in here because their labor rates are less. So that means the United Auto Workers and those kind of especially unionized industry don't like that. But then we can talk about from an agricultural standpoint, an ascending economy that buys a lot of our stuff, particularly corn, chicken, poultry, pork, things like that. Where do you see I'm going through some other goods here and some stuff like that.
Yep.
Is there an actual strategy? Does Trump have a strategy?
From who?
Does Trump have a strategy?
What
is it?
So
what do you think that? What do you think?
That's a fair.
What do you think? What do you think they want? Because I would say if it was just that we want to make sure we have access, and maybe a few protectionisms that he's convinced that Canada has up. Of course, the quote, the dairy being protected. I don't even know if that's a big deal.
I think it's a fair question to all three countries.
Yeah. What do you want?
What do you want? And what is your strategy here? And of course, the cog in all this is what the president wants. And that has been, I think, a fair criticism that Mexico and Canada have put on the White House is, okay, like, you say it's about fentanyl. We know that's so you could justify the IEEPA tariffs. We did some things to fix it. Saying that Canada was a problem on fentanyl was a, if you look at the numbers, it was kind of a joke. Yeah. But we got Black Hawk helicopters now flying the border and doing all this kind of stuff. So we did some things. Got a fentanyl czar, whatever. But what do you really want? And that's been the part. Besides, we want to fight with Canada and show the American public we're doing something. Mm-hmm. That's been kind of hard to figure out, and so it's really had. And maybe this is a strategy. Just have Canada, Mexico scrambling around. Canada got rid of the digital services tax. Canada removed some of the retaliatory tariffs. I guess that is accomplishing something, but it's actually just pulling us back from where we actually were in the first place. It's not real change. So I think it's interesting fodder for the White House to look like there's like a mistreatment of Canada. I think it has hurt the relationship. I do see in Canada a lot of, because as a reaction to this, I do see more of a sentiment of anti-Americanism, which I think is I don't like. I really don't.
I don't think it certainly didn't appear to ever have existed before, and it sure as hell came up fast. And then, by the way, in your province of Alberta, the booze sales are like down to American booze is down 2/3, Ontario down a couple 2/3. So when the Canadians are mad, they stop buying American booze. I know that happens.
Yeah, and I was saying this on our show today. I'm an anti-boycott person because of, we had Ontario Premier Doug Ford pouring out a thing of Crown Royal because a bottling plant, but that the corn and the rye and the barley going to Crown Royal is actually grown in Manitoba. Yeah, so you're actually pouring out Canadian grown product. It's just stupid. It's just nonsensical political grandstanding, and so much of this is what that what that is about. Canadians were very offended by the 51st state thing. I like, somebody had said to me in Nebraska this week, "Hey, you're from the 51st state." I'm like, yeah. Like, it's
right.
whatever. To me, I understand where it's coming from. It is at the root of it. It is a joke.
Yeah.
But not so funny when repeatedly said so.
Well, and also, no, it's not. And also, the bigger thing is, what are we accomplishing here? We can make our joke about my French accent, but when we decided we were mad at France 20 years ago over some war that the United States decided to start because our defense contractors paid to do so. Yeah, that's my commentary. That's my political commentary, by the way. So then it became, we didn't call them French fries anymore. We're supposed to call them, a real American, we'd call them freedom fries, and screw France. And all. It feels dumbed down. Where I would like to see things go is, and this is going to be a tough one, because there are some protectionisms, obviously, with the quota system and the supply management in Canada on poultry, eggs, and dairy. So that means you're not really going to open up that marketplace. Has it been a big deal? Is that a big component to U.S. Productive? Is it holding us back? Or I don't think so. It seems to me that ag is over here with the least amount of friction. And also the automotive industry, I thought would have had a big enough lobby to have just prevented this entirely because of, as you said, the cars that go across the border, parts, suppliers, et cetera.
If you look at the trade deals or the memorandums of understanding or whatever you want to put, the frameworks that the current White House has been negotiating, Japan and the UK are good examples. Agriculture is in the periphery. Mm-hmm. Okay, they're not at the root. So it's about energy, it's about Boeing planes, and it's about autos. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think Japan is a really good example in the sense that there's going to be an increase of U.S. rice that's going to go to Japan. They did not expand the TRQ, the tariff rate quota. They just expanded the percentage the U.S. will make up of that TRQ. Okay, so there will be expanded exports to Japan, but it's not like they're opening up their market to more rice in general to try to help some of the domestic production. That kind of similar is a bit of a tell for me. What you use that as in contrast to Canadian dairy. It's not about taking down supply management. It's about those TRQ definitions, which the U.S. has been complaining about through 2 USMCA dispute panels, is basically change the definition to our definition, and we're good. It's not about blowing the whole thing up. Now in Canada, for people that are against supply management, they've been using this as a wedge to say, "Hey, Trump's taking it down. If we don't get rid of supply management, we have no trade agreement." Yeah. I really fundamentally don't believe that.
No, I don't. And also, you're not even if it were. It's just not big enough for it to be the bargaining chip. All right, I'm going to give you the reasons why this needs to work out, because Shaun and I obviously think that we need to have this worked out, and I've said this for a while. Shaun just pointed out some of our bigger customers that as China continues to drop like a rock, the United States has the European Union as one of its top 3 customers. The European Union's population is declining. It already has happened. They've had a fertility rate around 1.2, 1.3 in all of Western Europe for the last 40 years. Their economy is okay, but it's not nearly as strong as it was. And you're talking about just like they had a very manufacturing, Germany being the economic engine, a very manufacturing-based economy that was also predicated on exports. Where's that now, Shaun? So the European Union as a economic powerhouse or as a population growth powerhouse, I don't think we're going to have more expansion there. So again, that points to why we should have a powerhouse here in North America, because our population is not declining, and our economies will have some hiccups. We're not probably facing some of the hurdles that European Union is. Same goes for Japan, shrinking population, declining economy. Not declining, but they're certainly stagnating. And then South Korea, rapidly declining population, and you could argue economic stagnation is going to set in there too. So I think.
Well, and sorry to interrupt.
No, good.
I think the Trump administration is very right to be critical of some of the trade behaviors of the EU. Yeah. Like, I think too many times we make this like, are you for the Trump agenda or are you against it? And I think it's not that it's not that simple.
No.
Like you can be for the idea of some of the things they're doing, but not like the method. Like there's lots of gray area here, and I think on Europe and some of the non-tariff trade barriers that they put up, Canada experiences that all the time. We've had a trade. There's been a CETA agreement, free trade agreement with Europe for going back, I don't know how many years, like 8-10 years probably, and some of the countries haven't even ratified it yet. It's kind of insanity, right? And so I believe that some of the things they're saying in regards to Europe and the use of non-tariff trade barriers, they're very accurate. They're very accurate.
Well, look. I mean, I talked about this in another show. My God, Shaun. France. The French farmers get mad and drive their tractors around the Eiffel Tower about every other day and protest something. Yeah. The talk about if Europe didn't protect its ag sector, I mean, they're the most protectionist probably they're not as difficult to deal with as India, but they're more protectionist than any group of countries we deal with.
Could you imagine if the Canadian or a U.S. farmer protested like the European farmer? What do you think the reaction would be to that? That's actually a fascinating, because
they take their wagons. They take the manure spreaders. They take the manure spreaders, remember, and drive to Parliament and blow liquid manure out. And yeah, I mean, they're a very they're protected because they get pissed if they don't get protection.
And heavily protected.
Heavily protected. Well, yeah. So they'll say, well, American farmers are subsidized. And I'll say, well, and you've got protectionism in place that keeps you from doing that. Let me have another thought about this, or your thought on it. How big can it be? If we build the North American fortress, like I said, it's not like we're going to quadruple or the production is probably where it is, but what do you think the big benefit is, besides the fact that right now we're creating unnecessary enemies and harming business that didn't need to be harmed? Can it be a lot bigger?
So I don't know what the number is in the times factor or what that looks like. When I talk to companies that are doing business on both sides of the border,
yep,
having more common a regulatory environment, and I'll use pesticides as the example. Mm-hmm. When companies are trying to register a product in Canada and the U.S., the lack of ability to use other countries' data slows down the registration of those products. So like that's an example. Regulatory harmonization. That's the phrase that you'll often hear when you're at a meeting. I think if you have stability and predictability of the ability for people to do business amongst the three countries.
Did anybody else hear that? Stability and the predictability to have the ability. Whew.
That's a lot of words.
That's a lot of abilities.
Anyway. You want the ability to be confident that there's going to be that's what happened. Predictability and stability. Yeah, well, boy.
Well, why do we always hear that? We always hear that markets hate uncertainty, and you'll hear that about your investments. And,
thank you. You said that much better than I did.
And there you go. So the uncertainty makes it so that you're not talking about just that we're selling a gravity bed wagon full of wheat across the border. We're talking about longer range planning, and we're also talking about a global economy right now, agricultural, that is, an agricultural global economy that's obviously squeezed and oversupplied. It would be comforting to have some predictability between.
Yeah, where are your friends?
Right.
That's you in this kind of a market, you got to find some friends, right. And it would make sense to find friends that you share borders with,
as well as common values,
very like-minded,
as well as common values. And so I think that we need to get this worked out. And I'll say that the supply chain thing should have taught us dependence on China, also dependence on. Remember when containers were unavailable, so shipping stuff across the oceans. You've got no need to go across oceans. We've got now a joint venture between a U.S. and Canadian rail. That came into being here in the last few years. We have common borders of thousands of miles between all three of these countries. So I ultimately believe that economics win out. I'm hoping that some of the bruised egos, when my Canadian followers hop on my social media posts and tell me that they're only eating jams from Europe now and they won't eat any Smuckers. Screw you, Americans! And
what
I'm
are
like,
we doing?
What the hell did I do? But anyway.
Hey, and here's the thing. It's a very long border, okay? They're too big. These are two very big countries. And the reality is that, when I go into Montana, I live an hour from the border. I have probably realistically, culturally and beliefs. I as an Albertan, I got more in common with the guys in Montana than I do maybe somebody on the East Coast, who probably on the East Coast, they've got more in common with people in New York or Vermont than they do with me. Right. I don't know. My dad always said they should have actually put the border vertical instead of horizontal. Would have made more sense, but obviously that's not.
Now we're talking about dividing. Now we're talking about Alberta becoming American. By the way,
don't get started on that.
I'm always fascinated, by the way, since you and I work in both countries and whatnot, that I had two of my Canadian friends that were something, and they said, "Oh, well, this guy's a Canadian," and it was my buddy Riley, who's in south of Winnipeg, and he said, "Oh yeah." And so to the American, he thought that they must know each other. I said, "Do you realize there's 40 million people up there? They don't all know one another." And then I said, he thinks that somehow you guys are close because they have no idea. I said, this guy you're talking about is north of Ottawa. And then I said, "Riley, do you want to tell him how far that is?" He says, "My farm is closer to Dallas, Texas than it is to this other Canadian guy's place." Huh? How could that be? I said, "Look at a map. Look at a map. Look at a map." Winnipeg is closer to Dallas than it is to Ottawa.
So true.
Something like that. But
it is so true. I maintain, Damian, that there are differences and there are issues to sort out. But speaking specifically about Canada and the U.S. and from a primary producer standpoint and the industry, there are so many advantages to working even more closely together and trying to figure out strategically how 1 + 1 = 3 and not, where we are right now, where 1 + 1 is kind of treated like a 0.75. I really think that we need to leverage each other and really, really work together more so for the benefit of the industry. Absolutely.
Well, and I think we both agree that this is a relationship and a cross-border economic combination that, again, really gets strong. People thought the European Union was essentially assembled, many economists would say, to be a rival to the United States, to have one common currency and then enough numbers and strength of economy to then not get over, what Luxembourg just can't go it alone, right? Even Germany just can't go it alone. So when you throw Germany, France, Italy, Spain, all these other countries together, that was the idea. Well, imagine then how you change the dynamic when you take an ascendant Mexico and the amount of natural resources between the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and assemble that into its own union. I think that that's where this whole nationalism needs to get a little smartened up.
Fair enough, man.
Is it going to happen?
I think this is going to pass. I do believe that. As I said in the negotiations, I think there is going to be some real bumps between now and this time in 2026.
Yep.
But common sense is going to prevail. And if there's one thing that's important to President Trump, it is the economic performance of the country. And America's economy performs better working with Canada than without. He also seems to like Mark Carney, the new prime minister, a lot more than he liked Justin Trudeau, because that's, the 51st state stuff dropped the second that we had a Canadian election. So I think he's described Carney as a man of substance. He's a former central banker in Canada and in England. He's described him as that man of substance, and hopefully they're going to be able to come to an agreement here as they negotiate this trade deal.
I hope it happens for everybody involved. I know Canada has to get a little win and has to make sure that we bring some pride back into it, because I know that there are some hurt feelings. But let's look at the long haul here.
They need to get over that too. Really, I think going back to February, where things were really hot. Remember, Wayne Gretzky was the enemy of the state in Canada because he's friends with the president. It was a really good example of a hyperbolic version of each other. So I've always said that President Trump is the most hyperbolic version of business in the U.S. Like, just incredible. Like, and I don't mean that in a negative sense. Like, just it's about the transaction. It's about the deal. Like, right. And Canadians their reaction to it was the most hyperbolic version of a Canadian. My feelings are hurt. Yeah. You're not treating me very well, and I'm having this incredibly adverse reaction. Yeah, I think it was just
not buy American products. I'm gonna cling to my maple syrup and hockey. And you know what? Screw you, Americans, and we're not gonna come and visit you on the American side of Niagara Falls ever again. And that did happen. So, all right. His name's Shaun Haney. Stay tuned. We're gonna have him back on here. He's got a show. Tell him about your show.
Yeah, Real Ag Radio. It's on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. We also podcast it, do it every weekday, do a lot of other stuff, other different podcasts and interviews. And the website's realagriculture.com, and also speak across Canada and the U.S. about stuff that we chatted about here today.
It's got a place in Arizona, but we've never connected at our winter places. We're going to do
we need to.
And we'll do that sometime between
this winter.
Yeah, this winter. And you'll know that things have patched up between our two countries if we get along and we put a picture on social media of us drinking a Molson together. Or if you see him take a hockey stick and hit me, you'll know that we didn't get things worked out. So
yeah. Hard to find
They call them a peaceful country. Their biggest exports to the United States, hockey players and whiskey. You tell me who thinks that's peaceful. His name's Shaun Haney. My name is Damian Mason, and thank you for tuning in. This is The Business of Agriculture. This episode of The Business of Agriculture was brought to you by my friends at New Fields Ag. American-made, American-owned, focusing on the success of the American farmer. That's New Fields Ag, offering a complete lineup of high-performing biological products for you, the American farmer. Visit newfieldsag.com for more.